Hello everyone, it's starting to warm up and that always gets me in a better mood, so let's answer questions asked by $3 supporters at Patreon and Subscribestar in February. If you'd like to ask a question for March, the links are below. Let's start on Subscribestar, where FunWithFacts asks, what are your thoughts on the sex changes for minors debate? Should they be allowed with the consent of the child, parents, and doctors, or are kids simply too young to properly consent to these irreversible and life-changing procedures? No. Absolutely not. And this shouldn't have been a question in the first place, less so now that the first group of kids they did this to have grown up and are now suing their parents and doctors for messing up their life. I'm linking to a great video from Aidan Paladin covering a confession from Dr. Christopher Dummett, the doctor who started all of this biological denial stuff, admitting that he just made it all up. It's based on absolutely no science whatsoever, and none of the work based on his findings ever questioned that fundamental assertion. Dickin Myanus asks, what do I do again? I don't know. You tell us, I guess. I guess, like the rest of us, you do the best you can with what you have. So, yeah, I answer all your questions. There you go. Moving on. Tomasz Urbański asks, I'm interested in your take on this tweet. It's a tweet from Temple of Consciousness, which already just fills me with all sorts of confidence, I can tell you that right now. Most cases of taking consumer loans are immoral. Taking such a loan is equivalent to misleading yourself into believing that you can afford for what in reality you cannot. Loans make most goods more expensive. First of all, I don't know what all the random hashtagging is about, but this sounds like the same kind of misunderstanding of usury that make idiots criticize Lysander Spooner. He realized how important it was for low-income people to be able to get access to credit, and he opposed the usury laws of his time based on that. Also, this tweet only has 24 views and 1 like, so I don't really know why we're paying it any attention. But again, I answer all of your questions. Anyway, it's understandable why someone would feel that way looking at today's world, which, if anything, is screwed up in the opposite direction as it was in Spooner's. The Keynesian pseudoscience that reigns in our government and banking system basically says savings is bad and we need to push interest rates to the floor so that people take out loans and don't save. Again, economics is all about the equilibrium. At low interest rates, people save less and spend more. That's good if you have a healthy economy with a good amount already saved up. It allows people to have a high quality of life while firms make investments in the long-term projects that will increase the quality of society for decades to come. Higher interest rates are actually good if you have problems, though. If people don't have enough saved up, then they're not engaging in the deferred gratification that's the basis of all that investment to begin with. In a situation like that, regular people like you and me are in a bit of a crunch, or even a crisis, and we need to encourage everyone to save as much as they can and have firms invest in shorter-term projects to help us improve our lives in the short term. A free market would constantly be seeking the balance between these two forces. Anyone who tells you that things need to be skewed one way or another is a grifter who does not have your best interests at heart. I answer the big questions and the small questions, and they just get bigger when we move over to Patreon, where Darth Vega asks, my friend says that AI and robots are going to kill so many jobs that we will have to implement UBI just so all the new unemployed can survive. Thoughts? Same answer as always. Technology does not kill jobs. It frees up labor resources for more productive uses. Again, I point to the fact that over 90% of us used to be farmers. Then, when machinery made farming easier, did 90% of us starve? No! We did other things. and our lives are immeasurably better than they were when we were farming. We always have the "this time is different" fallacy, and we have that with AI. AI is just of a different character, and so that makes it different because reasons. Okay, thought experiment. What if the mechanization of farming had only been the development of an AI farmer? You had robots doing the farming instead of people. So now it's AI taking the farming jobs instead of mechanization. So how do things work out any differently? Everything else would still happen the way it did. People went on to do other things, like delivering Amazon packages. And it'll be this way again with AI. I can't tell you what the new jobs will be any more than someone would have been able to predict Amazon in 1800. But they will happen, and we'll be much better off for it. I'm not saying there aren't going to be issues with AI. There are always issues with any new technology that we have to deal with. But this just isn't one of them. Sid Padmanaban asks, I've seen a lot of people, Catholics in particular, try to downplay how bad the Spanish Inquisition was. Specifically, they claim that the Inquisition was exaggerated as a part of propaganda from England to discredit Spain and Catholicism in general, that heretics were given fair trials and due process, and that torture and executions were rare. What are your thoughts on this? You should already know my reply. It's blatant historical negationism driven by a need to justify their increasingly unjustifiable Bronze Age mythology. I don't need to go to any external sources for this. I'm just looking at their claims in your very question. For example, how is it possible to have a fair trial for heresy? There is no moral or ethical justification for heresy even being a law on the books. No trial for heresy can ever be fair. I'm going to, once again, quote one of my favorite movies, Inherit the Wind. I say that you cannot administer a wicked law impartially. You can only punish, only destroy. And I warn you that a wicked law, like cholera, destroys everyone it touches, its upholders as well as its defiers. And I don't know what rare is supposed to mean in the context of torture and execution. That's never supposed to happen at all. There is never any ethical justification for torture and execution. As wrong as they are on the facts, they're even more wrong by what they acknowledge. They are defending torture, defending execution, and defending trials for heresy. And that tells you everything you need to know about their character and how their religion has spoiled and twisted and corrupted it. And we wrap things up with an even bigger question from DeltaWolf, who asks, So Shane, what are your thoughts on the famous/infamous Mouse Utopia experiment? A lot of Malthusian environmentalists and socialists love to cite it as an example of how modern society is doomed to fail and why human enterprise and progress either needs to be restricted by the state at best or stopped completely at worst. Which is a weird thing to say because the whole idea of the experiment was to show how wonderful central planning could be, and it failed miserably. Honestly, I'm no scientist, but it really seems like the Mouse Utopia experiment was heavily flawed and was clearly set up to be a self-fulfilling experiment with no regard for other factors. So, quick summary. John B. Calhoun took 4 breeding pairs of mice and put them in an environment that would eliminate all problems of mortality except for old age. They had access to limitless food and water, nesting material, a perfect temperature, and, of course, no predators. So they bred like crazy, and with no way to emigrate elsewhere, they had a population crisis which led to all sorts of mean, nasty, ugly things. It reminds me a bit of Plymouth Plantation, which, as I've covered in other videos, started as a utopia where everyone starved because they became lazy, and then used property rights to make everyone hardworking and prosperous. Calhoun's results have been heavily criticized. First of all, not all of the mice went berserk. Those who managed to take control of their space, basically claim some property as their own, had relatively normal lives. And the population crisis was not about overpopulation. The population never exceeded 80% capacity. It just put them in a confined area where they couldn't all properly satisfy their territorial instincts. Plus, 4 breeding pairs is a lot of inbreeding for what became thousands of mice. Calhoun later claimed that it wasn't even supposed to be an experiment about human society. It was about studying the dynamics of prison conditions. It was really just a bad experiment from the start, violating all the norms of animal behavioral research that was put in place for very good reasons. Also, although mice do have some behaviors that are analogous to human behavior, they have very different social dynamics to humans. Those social dynamics were difficult for mice to set up in the confined area of the experiment. While Calhoun thought he was giving them utopia, he was also preventing them from having the kind of social structures they would prefer and causing them severe psychological damage as a result. The long and the short of it is, he tortured a bunch of mice and they went crazy. They would have been much better off if he just left them alone. So, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, comments for the Comic God, shares for the Share Throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell, and check out other videos on my channel and like and share them as well to get them above the shadow banning. Again, I cannot stress enough how much that helps. And of course, go to donate.bogosity.tv for all sorts of ways to support, including PayPal, Venmo, and various cryptocurrencies. Thanks again, and until next time, stay strong and be free.